2 o'clock in California. So that means about 3:15 we will break, and at 3:45 we will get together again. So there will be 2 sessions of 1 hour, 15 minutes with a gap of 30 minutes in between them, so that people can ease themselves and so on in that time. Now, we said yesterday that Krishnaji is pointing to the need for religious inquiry. And in these chapters, he points out that it is absolutely necessary that one understands oneself, because without that understanding of oneself, there is no foundation for inquiry. The understanding of yourself, I'm now quoting him, the understanding of yourself is not the understanding of the self with the capital S, which is permanent, so-called soul, Atman, or super self. It means understanding your daily life, the way you talk, the motives, the ambitions, the fears, the anxiety, desire for power, position, the conflicts that arise. All that is the you. Please watch yourself, how you walk, talk, dress, eat. See and try sometimes when you have leisure, how you are making yourself very important. Go and try. Then you will see for yourself what an extraordinary thing it is to love, to have affection. Any love, any affection which has a motive, which has a purpose, is not love at all. And we only love when we have no motive. Now, in these chapters, he points out that we are the product of our past. Millions of years past have produced the body and the brain and the biological instincts within us. He has said that with his own insights, but scientists have corroborated that. Through the study of the brain, they tell us that there is a fish brain inside, and then the reptilian brain, and over that, the mammalian brain, and then the neocortex, which makes for the brain to be human. So all those instincts are included in that. And when we are born, the brain is already hardwired to have all these instincts. So that is from millions of years of past. After that, because we grow up in a particular family with a particular religion, in a particular town, which has a particular culture, and all that makes for the cultural past. For most religions, that goes about 2,000 years or so. For some, it may be 4,000 or 5,000 years. For others, it may be only 1,000 years. But it's a fairly long past. And all those values and so on also are imbibed and remembered and constitute the memory, the cultural memory in the brain, or the cultural conditioning of the brain. So it sees from that point of view. Then there is the past of this lifetime, which is whatever, 50 to 100 years, depending on from birth till now. Whatever experiences one has been through, the pleasures and pains, including psychological hurts and fears and sorrow and so on, all those are also remembered in the brain and often create psychological complexes and so on. And over that is the knowledge that we acquire in school, college, university, and so on, if one has had the good fortune to go to all these. So that's what it means that we are made up of our past. So what does it mean, this whole question of understanding ourselves? Are we completely trapped in this conditioning? Or can our thinking, imagination, inquiry come out of it, be free of it, and can one therefore think more creatively and not necessarily only from that point of view? Because within our consciousness is both the individual consciousness, which is this conditioned consciousness, or you can also call it the personality. And there is also the universal consciousness, which is the capacity for awareness, the capacity for inquiry, the capacity for creativity. They are not coming out of this condition. They are beyond this condition. So there is the personal conditioning and there is the universal part of our consciousness. Now, if one is very attached to the personality, if one is completely consumed by one's conditioning, identifies with it, that gets attached to it, the opinions, the values, the culture and all that, that's what constitutes the ego. Then one becomes a separate self, dividing oneself from others who are conditioned differently. All this he has explained. And there are consequences of that in our relationships and therefore in our society. So he points out that all the disorder that is there in society that we read about is coming out of this process of individual conditioning. And unless we free ourselves of this, we become incapable of real learning, deep learning. Now, is that possible at all? Perhaps many scientists and so on consider that, that this is more or less deterministic. But nature has put within the human consciousness this capacity for inquiry. It's innately there. Every human being has the capacity for inquiry, has intelligence, has memory, has imagination, has language and thinking ability. All these have come to us in the course of evolution. And they were necessary because without them, we would not have survived in the forest. But in his dialogues with David Bohm, Krishnaji points out that at some point humanity took a wrong turn. That means initially all these faculties were being used to serve for survival and for protection. which was their purpose. But eventually, at certain point, they were used to create the ego, the separate self, and all the negative emotions came into it, namely greed and power and status and violence and so on. So the question is, are we permanently trapped in all this? Both the instincts and all this conditioning. Or there is a possibility to learn about all this and change, which is what he called the transformation. Obviously, human beings have a certain amount of freedom. There is a certain amount of instinctive amount of violence in us, which is there also in the animal. But you find human beings who have promoted that violence and become people like Hitler, and Alexander and Mussolini and so on, or Stalin. And there have been other people like the Buddha and Jesus Christ or Krishnamurti or Gandhi, Mandela and so on, who have decimated that violence and come to a state of very low or completely non-violent state. So apparently there is freedom for us, and that freedom needs to be exercised. If we don't, then there is not much change that is possible. And because we have not exercised that freedom to learn about oneself, Krishnaji says there has been no psychological evolution. That modern man is basically psychologically, inwardly, as primitive as the primitive man. Only the outer facade has changed. He has better explanations, more intelligent ability to use language and so on, behind which he hides all that. But inwardly, deep down, there is division, there is violence, there is greed, there is selfishness, and so on. And because we are this way, our society is the way it is. So he says we are completely responsible for the whole of the world and the society, the state of the world and society. But because we separate ourselves and think of ourselves as separate individuals, we have this illusion that we are not contributing to that. Actually, we are all contributing to that. And therefore, he said the crisis is at the level of foundation. It's not out there. And all the time, our attempts have been to solve the crisis that keeps coming all the time in the form of war, in the form of rioting, in the form of thefts and rape and kidnapping and so, crime, and inability to live cooperatively, all that, all the negative emotions in us. So he says it won't change by just changing the structure outwardly. You need a deep transformation in consciousness, which is only possible by learning about oneself. So real purpose of religion, the religious quest, is the quest for self-knowledge. We shall see shortly why ordinary knowledge which we have cultivated in society does not create wisdom. It does not transform consciousness. It just increases the ability and the power of a person, including the ability to hide behind a set of explanations and words and so on, which make it appear that one is very noble and one is very respectable. When you look deep down inside yourself, he says, that is honest discovery of what one actually is, not as one thinks one should be, not the ideal that one can imagine, but what one is actually. It demands a lot of honesty and exploration to really understand how it functions. It is that understanding which brings about change, not our will, not our control. Control only changes the manifestation. I mean, you may feel hatred and you may not express it because you suppress yourself. But at the level of consciousness, you are not free. You have got hatred. One man out of hatred may kill, another one may just become angry or abusive. A third one may suppress the whole thing and move away from that relationship. But these are differences of expression of the inner content of consciousness. And virtue, which is the purpose of the religious quest, is the inner state of consciousness. So Krishna says, one has to eliminate all this disorder in consciousness, because it is this disorder in consciousness which is manifesting as disorder in our society, in our relationships. So at a deep level, you cannot transform society in a significant way. Of course, you can make better computers, better cars, or more roads and bridges and so on, all of which we are doing, and we are calling that as progress. But we have not been able to get rid of war. We have not been able to get rid of religious division, caste division in India, class division, the division between blacks and whites. All that won't go away until there is this deeper transformation at the level of consciousness. That means the way you look at another human being, the way you feel towards another human being actually must change, not just your ideas about how it should be. Just saying that one should not get angry, one should love one's neighbor and so on, doesn't work. We went into that yesterday, that our decisions are work only in very superficial matters. They don't really transform consciousness. And we have tried many different things. We have tried religions. Religions hoped that by giving a moral code, by worshipping, by doing some rituals, by having fear of God, will change human beings. It has not worked. I don't want to go into the details of why it has not worked. I think we all understand that it has not worked. It has led to conformity. You begin to conform to the rules of your religion and so on, or your ideology. And that gives you a certain respectability in society. For that reason, one accepts the conditioning, because if you question the conditioning, you get into trouble. And so there is a certain amount of fear with which society imposes that conditioning on you. Similarly, we have never been able to free ourselves of crime. We have instituted a huge system of courts and police and prison sentences and so on to curb crime. But we are not free from crime. We have not been for thousands of years. The crime is going on. Because control does not remove the disease. The disease is at the level of consciousness. And the society has to look into it as to why a child that is born in our society becomes a criminal. So the whole of society is responsible for that, but we have merely instituted a mechanism for eliminating that human being from society. So merely restructuring, changing the laws, maybe the ideology, either democracy or capitalism and dictatorship or communism, all these things, none of them have really made a major difference because they have not transformed the consciousness of man. And therefore, the violence in man manifests in a somewhat different way in communist society and somewhat different way in capitalist society and so on. But it is, you will not be free from that. So all these are reasons why he says that real religion is this learning about oneself. And that means we need to examine our conditioning, get closely in contact with it, see what it is, what are our fears, what are our motives, what are our jealousies. And unless we know ourselves and see that all that is me, we have this illusion that I am something separate from my anger or my violence. Actually, we separate ourselves from it as if it's a disease. Now, when you have a disease, some germ, external germ gets into your body and causes a fever and symptoms and causes a disease. Then the doctor gives you medicine and the germs are killed and you come back to health. Of course, the medicines also damage the body, but eventually the body recovers from it. We are all familiar with this process. And somehow we carry over this concept to the psychological problems also. We think that the anger can also be dealt with in that way. But actually, the anger also has a whole causation within the consciousness. It's the same consciousness. So the consciousness gets split into two parts. One part which is producing from the conditioning, producing the anger, and another part which says you should not be angry. And there is conflict between these two. And he says that's not freedom. That's all the time using will to suppress. It's fighting against oneself. And that's not a religious life. That's not a peaceful life. It produces conflict. So he has questioned almost all the things that we have tried, including knowledge. We have grown enormously in knowledge, both scientific knowledge, in art, in music, architecture, agriculture, you name it, and we have tremendous amount of knowledge in every field now. And knowledge is power, knowledge is ability. So we have all that. But power and ability don't transform consciousness, don't bring wisdom into the human being. So they can be used destructively. And that's what we see. We see that the nuclear power which has been generated by the scientific knowledge is used to make bombs because politicians are interested in war, doing war, because we believe in violence, using violence to settle international disputes, and so on. So the lack of wisdom becomes more serious when you have more power. Earlier, wars were confined to small areas and only the armies used to fight. Now with a single bomb you can decimate the whole country, a whole country. All the innocent people also. So it's a more dangerous state in which we are, because we have got knowledge, but we have not come upon wisdom. So I'm reminded of T.S. Eliot's poem called The Rock, where in the last stanza, he raises these questions which refer to this. He says, where is the life that we have lost in our living? Where is the wisdom that we have lost in our knowledge? Where is the knowledge we have lost in information? In 2000 years, the cycles of heaven take us away from God and unto dust. So there he is saying, some 2000 years ago, humanity was mainly concerned with wisdom, whether it was Socrates or the Buddha or Lao Tzu. All these people, they were interested in wisdom. Self-knowledge was given a very high place. The Buddha even said that that's the only knowledge. Socrates said that too. They did not regard knowledge of the world as they regarded it as a lower form of knowledge. Then there started the big knowledge revolution, expansion of knowledge enormously in art, music, science, everywhere. In that somewhere we lost our wisdom. The attention got into increasing knowledge more and more. And now even knowledge is going away because nobody now writes love letters the way Elizabeth Barrett wrote to Robert Browning and vice versa. So literature is disappearing, and in its place has come information, this information technology. And he's saying that knowledge is disappearing. In its place is coming to information. And the poet says that you are going away from God unto dust. He's just raising that question in a poetic way. So we need to listen to it, not either agree or disagree, but dwell on this. Because without wisdom, it goes wrong. Power goes wrong. Wisdom goes wrong. Knowledge goes wrong. It's misused. So how do we grow in wisdom? How does a human being grow in wisdom? You can't say you can't grow in wisdom because all these people are examples. The Buddha, even Gandhiji, what he was in England as a lawyer, and the man who died in 1948 in India. There's enormous difference between the two. How does that change occur? And Mandela, how does that change occur? Or Václav Havel in Czechoslovakia. There are any number of cases like that of people who have actually come upon a lot of wisdom. They may not be completely free people. Completely free people are very few and far between. But if they have overcome hatred in their heart and they have come upon love and compassion, it's a big transformation in consciousness. Of course, it doesn't mean that one should be satisfied with partial transformation. But once you have a learning mind, you keep learning and growing. And the ultimate stage of that is total freedom from all illusion, so that you live with insight all the time. Now, why does knowledge not take us there? Why can't we read all this from a book? Or because intellectual understanding is not realization of the truth. So one has to understand this. What is the meaning of truth here in the religious quest? Normally in society, we use the word truth to mean an accurate description of what took place. So if your son comes back from school, you can ask him what happened in the school today. He describes what happened, and you can ask him, are you telling the truth? There you mean by truth is your description, accurate description of the facts, or are you distorting, are you exaggerating and denigrating some parts, omitting some parts and so on. So that's one meaning we give to the word truth. The other meaning we give to the word truth is when we say the law of gravitation is a great truth of nature, about nature. That means a certain cause and effect relationship has always been found to be true. It's a law of nature. And that law is also often referred to as truth. Engineers call a screw as true. When it moves 1 millimeter in every round accurately, then it's a true screw, like that. So the word truth is used in many ways. But none of these is the meaning here. The religious truth. Religious truth is at the level of perception. It comes into existence when a consciousness perceives what is, namely the fact, without any distortion. Now, that requires freedom from conditioning, because if you are held with your conditioning, that conditioning will distort your perception. A very coarse example of that is that a Hindu looks at a cow and sees a goddess. And an American looks at the same cow and sees beef, which means their conditioning, their desires are affecting their perception. So what you perceive is not the truth, because the conditioning colors your perception. That's why freedom from conditioning is a prerequisite for learning. Learning of this kind, which is discerning what is true from what is false. And the conditioning is known. And in the conditioning, there are many things that are healthy, normal, they don't create any disorder. You don't need to throw them out. But there are also many things which are false or have a narrow vision, product of narrow vision, and therefore create a lot of cruelty and disorder, and you are not aware of it. That's why it's an illusion. If you know that your mind is in illusion, the illusion goes away. But the man who is having an illusion is not aware that he is in illusion. Hitler was not aware that his opinion is an illusion, that Jews are vermin and should be eliminated and so on. Lot of cruelty went on because he took that to be true. He said, I'm improving the world. I want to get rid of this kind of people. And you find similar things happening today when you want to eliminate all the Islamic world and things like that. You want to use violence and remove people and so on. It's a very limited understanding. So this limited understanding is lack of wisdom. When you have a long vision, that is wisdom. And without the long vision, your decisions, your efforts all suffer. You may think that you are doing very good work and you are noble, but that may be an illusion. One example I would give is that when you have a very limited idea of education, as you find today in the world, Then they have mistaken it to just mean training an individual to get some profession and have a job and earn money. Then a principal or the vice chancellor of a university with such a vision works very hard trying to implement that and get his students to get first division. A large number of students must work hard and get more marks in the examinations, get A-level and all that. But all that is within that limited vision, and therefore it's part of the illusion. Because really, education is meant for the whole of that human being, including his psyche, including his character, his understanding of himself, and so on. And you have ignored all that and only used education for training purpose, which means empowering an individual without giving him wisdom. And that's a combination that is inviting disaster. The difference between God and the devil, both are concepts, but the difference between them is not one of power. God is powerful and devil is also infinitely powerful. The difference is that God has love, compassion, justice, and the devil is selfish and cruel. So what is there in our education to ensure that we are not producing little Hitlers, that we are producing godlike human beings, wise human beings? Nothing. So when you don't have long vision, when you don't have wisdom, it will always go wrong. And that is what Krishnamurti, according to me, is pointing out and saying that it's absolutely essential for every human being to learn about himself. And that's why he wanted to change education, because it's something that is needed by every human being. He was not against the training for a job. Of course, that is part of life, but it should not be the main concern of education. So limited vision, which is lack of wisdom, means you expend a lot of energy and you waste a lot of energy doing something which you feel is good and right, but it is not so. So you are working under an illusion. That's why one must not be too sure of what one thinks. One has to have this element of doubt, a feeling that I don't really know, that I am a conditioned mind, conditioned human being. And what my mind is telling me is coming from that conditioning, which is a very limited thing in this world. And therefore, I must not identify with it. I must not accept it and assert it. I must question it. We do question other people's opinions. We don't question our own opinions sufficiently because we identify with them. And when you identify with it, you become to possess it. You feel attached to it, and therefore you want to defend it and propagate it, and so on. So all that becomes the egoistic process. So how to do this learning when you are conditioned? You become aware that you are conditioned, but you are not free from the condition. For that, he says, watch yourself, pay attention, watch yourself in daily living. Your consciousness is revealing itself in your relationships, day-to-day relationships. Stay with the questions and observe what's going on and learn from observing and perception. then you will see the danger of the limited vision. Then you will see the danger of approaching things with self-interest. And once you perceive the danger of something, it will drop away. Because nature has put an intelligence into our system, our body-mind system, that does not allow you to embrace danger. So the very fact that one is tempted is that one is not aware of the danger. If I might give a small metaphor to explain this. You know, in California, we have a lot of forest fires, and they have become a big problem. It always starts as a small fire. Maybe somebody has thrown a cigarette or something like that, and it starts. And if he is aware, if he is watchful, all he has to do is to stamp his foot on it and end it. But when he is not aware, it becomes a big forest fire. And then the whole town and all the firemen and so on, not able to put it out. Something similar happens with us. We develop attachment. We develop addictions. They always begin in a very small way. And you begin to enjoy it. And you are not aware of the danger. Therefore, you indulge more in it. And ultimately, chemistry gets set up in the body, and all this drug addiction and alcohol addiction, or addiction to your work, all addiction, it becomes so strong that it becomes extremely difficult to extricate oneself from it. So it is important to have this awareness of the danger, so that you notice that as soon as it begins to develop, as soon as the fire starts, that's the time to act on it. And that requires tremendous mindfulness. So they prescribe that live in the present. Let your mind be in the present. So be aware that you are sitting. Be aware that you are walking. Be aware that you are eating food. Be aware that you are angry. Whatever it is you are doing, be watchful, be aware. Let your mind be there and not absent-minded, thinking about something in your office and in your profession or some other problem, which is a very peculiar problem of the human consciousness, that thought can make you completely absent from the present location. You can be in a classroom where a lecture is going on physically, but you may be in your office mentally. You may be thinking of the future or of the past, and therefore not paying attention. That's not possible for an animal, perhaps, but for us it is possible. And that is a big problem, because one needs to watch oneself in order to know oneself. And this paying attention, full attention, is absolutely important also for sensing the beauty and the joy in that relationship. If we are not paying attention to the tree, to the flower, to the river, to your wife, to your child, you don't develop that relationship. And you don't have the joy and the love in that relationship, which come through contact, which is what we call as sensitivity. Sensitivity is not just from the intellect. Sensitivity comes through contact. So one has to be actually in contact with one's consciousness, be aware of the functioning of the consciousness. Now, we are conditioned strongly to judge what is happening, to say this should be so, this should not be so. This is good, this is bad, this is right, that is wrong. That judgment all comes from our conditioning. And therefore that becomes colored. It's different for the Muslim, it's different for the Hindu, it's different for the Christian and so on, because their conditioning is different. So is it possible not to do it through the personality, but through the universal self, universal consciousness, which means use passive awareness. Passive in the sense is not trying to interfere with the phenomenon. It's just watching the phenomenon, not in order to change it or suppress it or achieve some result, but merely to understand what is taking place. So that's a very unique teaching in Krishnamurti. One may not accept it. One may say this is all nonsense. But that's the teaching. That's what he is trying to convey. That if you give full attention to what is actually taking place, what is undergoes a change. Transformation happens that way. Because you come upon wisdom through this process of self-knowledge. Because when thought is not interfering, it's not comparing, it is not judging, it is not evaluating, it's not justifying, it's not condemning. When thought is not interfering, then there is a possibility of insight. Because your awareness and your attention goes much deeper. Whereas thought concentrates on a particular fragment only of what is taking place, calls it important or unimportant and so on, divides. So if thought can be silent, one can pay a lot better attention. That's why the silent mind, he advocates that the silent mind, which is the free mind, because otherwise obsessively the mind is chattering all the time, which means your conditioning is interfering all the time. Now, human consciousness has this capacity of insight, both in science and in religion. All major discoveries have come through a process of insight, not through thinking. The thought has created the question, but the answer not there in the conditioning or in the known. And therefore, it has to be picked out of the unknown. And that requires this process of observation, wonder, inquiry, using all the senses to understand. That's how all, quantum mechanics, relativity, those discoveries have all been made that way. Theory of evolution, all that. Science has also progressed in that way, though their knowledge has a much bigger role than in this field of religion, religious inquiry. All paths, all methods, all techniques, all worship is part of the known. And wisdom, truth is the unknown. So there is no path to truth. It's a creative perception that is needed. It's a great mystery how the human consciousness is capable of creativity. The computer is not capable of creativity. It can think faster, it can calculate faster than us, but it is not capable of creativity. We have underestimated the need for awareness and overemphasized the usefulness of knowledge and thinking. Of course, in daily life it has importance, and there it is correct to use it. So one is not saying don't think, or obviously one is not saying that. Find out its right place is the question. That's why it is, Krishnamurti called it the art of living. Art means when you put everything in its right place, it creates beauty. And sensitivity is absolutely essential. Without sensitivity, you don't even notice things. If you are not sensitive to the beauty of nature, you will just walk by a garden or a river and not even notice it, because your mind is all the time thinking of some problem in your office or profession. Not that it should not be done and so on. One is just saying there is this causation. So he is pointing out that just as there is causation in nature, which science studies, and that's how science has grown in its knowledge and so on. In the same way, there is causation in the human psyche. And all these negative emotions which affect our relationships, they have a cause, and if you can investigate it, you can discover that there is some belief, some illusion from which it emanates. And because it's an illusion or a belief, which is just a thought construct, it has no existence in nature, therefore it can be broken. So if the cause can be eliminated, the effect disappears. And that's how disorder ends in consciousness, and you come upon order. In Hinduism and so on, it's called the Gyan Marg. Gyan Marg is not the path of knowledge, but pragya. Pragya is wisdom. So self-knowledge is the way to wisdom, and without wisdom, you don't learn whatever. So there's also a statement of Krishnamurti saying, come upon love, which means total absence of self-interest or motive. Then do what you will, it will be right. That means the whole problem is this ego. But we don't think so. We think ego is a friend. It brings me profit, it brings me consolation, it brings me pleasure, and so on. So this quest for truth, in a way, is contrary to the instinct of seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. That's why it is difficult. You have to go beyond that. You have to be willing to stay with pain, to stay with disturbance, in order to understand it and therefore be free of it. And that is why very few people are willing to venture into that. And that's what we said yesterday, or we read from Krishnamurti. He said, if you are serious, it will mean a lot for you. But if you are not serious, you are just casual, this is what Krishnamurti's opinion is, that's what Gandhi's opinion is, that's what Buddha's opinion is. You can do all this comparative religion and so on without any transformation of consciousness or without coming upon any wisdom. So knowledge is not wisdom. Long ago, I came across a small verse which pointed to this. It said, knowledge and wisdom, far from being one, ofttimes have no connection. Knowledge dwells in minds replete with the thoughts of others. Wisdom in those attentive to their own. Knowledge is proud that it knows so much. Wisdom is humble that it knows no more. So friends, I'll end it here. There may be other points which were not mentioned by me, which you must have read in the 2 chapters. Feel free to ask questions. And let me look at the time. It is now 6 o'clock, so 1 hour is over. We can have some questions now for 15 minutes and then break for half an hour. And then in the next session, we can have more questions.
Yeah, please go ahead and put down your name in the chat box.
Louie, Louie.
Yes. The first question is
Here half
Prasad.
an hour. I've been on the phone half an hour. I listened to the speaker.
Ma'am, it seems you have joined through a phone. At this point, if
Zoom
you have
and
any
phone.
question,
No.
okay. Please mute yourself, and if you do have a question, you can unmute and ask the question.
Mute.
Thank you.
Star 6.
Yes, sir. The first question is from Mr. Prasad.
Yes, sir.
Unmute yourself, Prasad, and go ahead and ask the question.
Sorry about that. Namaste, Professor Krishna.
Namaste, Prasadji.
My question is like the conditioning of Bhakti Yoga. Is that a conditioning like a hurdle for this Gnana Yoga? Like ours is like self-inquiry Gnana Yoga. Is the Bhakti like simultaneously if you practice, like Bhakti, like praying some God or prayers or something like that, is that viewed as a hurdle in the path of Gnana Yoga? Or you can practice both?
If you're doing it experimentally, in order to understand what bhakti does, then it's part of the learning of the human mind. But if you're doing it with a sense of achieving something for yourself, then it's part of the ego movement of the mind. So the approach to the technique matters more than the technique and the result of the technique. Of course, certain techniques will produce certain results, but that result is not freedom or truth or wisdom. You can come upon good health doing yoga. You can practice music and enjoy music and so on. So there are a lot of techniques which can bring joy. You can pray and it brings a certain peace to the mind and so on. But it won't free the mind of all this conflict and other things which we have been talking about. That's what Krishnaji's view is. Now my observation is that millions of people do bhakti because it's rather easy to do, and one comes upon a certain amount of peace in the mind, which gets destroyed because it has not eliminated the cause of the disturbance, so the disturbance will come again. But at that time, after the prayer or the bhajan or the mantram, you do become peaceful. Right? No technique is completely a barrier to freedom, but it doesn't achieve freedom. So if you see in history, millions of people do bhakti, but there was only one Mirabai. Now, how does that person who does bhakti go very deep into it and become free of the ego, and others don't? So apparently, it's not just the technique or the method that is doing it. In the same way, we can read in detail what all Krishnamurti did between 1920 and 1922, what food he ate and what meditation he did and so on. And we can do all that. Will you come to the 1922 experience of oneness which he experienced under the pepper tree? The answer is no, because that insight, that deep experience, divine if you like, is a mysterious process. It does not have a causation, and therefore it is not caused by what preceded. It transcends what preceded. It happened not because of what was there before, but in spite of it. You know, strangely, in science also there is such a process. The quantum transition doesn't take time. The electron just disappears from one level and appears at another level instantaneously. It doesn't travel from one place to the other. So really funny.
Thank you.
There are processes which don't take time, but all this bhakti and some meditation or techniques and so on, not that one should not do it, but don't do it with the idea that it will bring you freedom or it will, yeah, that becomes an illusion.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you.
Next, the next question is from Mr. Tazi Amzadi.
Yes. Hello, Dr. Krishna. Thank you for the precious teaching.
Welcome.
My question is the role of energy in self-understanding, and if the process of aging affects that and reduces the possibility or not.
We do need tremendous energy in order to sustain this inquiry and learning for oneself and paying all the attention and so on. But we do have tremendous amount of energy. We dissipate that energy in all kinds of conflict and worry and anxiety and hatred and things like that. So if the disorder in the consciousness is ended, then you would have much more energy in life because you are not dissipating energy in conflict. But when you are controlling yourself, when you are suppressing and so on, you are wasting energy. It's like friction. You're wasting energy. Similarly, if the mind is all the time comparing with others, it feels envy, it feels jealousy, it feels inferiority or superiority, hierarchy. All those things consume. All that disorder is there because one compares. Now, if one sees the falseness of that and asks oneself, why do I compare? And it drops away, then it conserves a lot of energy for you. And that energy can be expended further in learning more. So, in paying attention to this process of learning. So it is hard work. I mean, learning about oneself is much harder work than learning physics or mathematics and so on. Because there is no authority who can teach you that. So yes, energy has an important role, but we have energy. You know, you feel lazy, but if just now a tiger enters the room, you will discover how much energy you have. So all that is lying dormant. It gets activated as soon as there is a fear or there is a desire or something, it gets activated. So energy, we are not short of energy, but we dissipate it.
Thank you.
Addictions, all that also. The body also has to have energy.
So the next question is from Mr. Salvador David.
Welcome.
Hi, Professor.
Oh, Salvador.
Thank you very much. This is my question.
Please.
I'm taking it from the first chapter
Yes.
of our homework. Would you elaborate a little more to the statement made by Krishnamurti when he says that after peeling off little by little the mind, and when at last one comes to the center, one finds there is nothing there, because one mind has been incapable, dull, and insensitive. Having observed this process, is there not a different approach altogether that is it not possible to explode from the center?
Yeah, well, that's what happened with him. And so he has a right to ask that question. But in my experience, people are not able to explode from the center. When you start exploring and engaging in this inquiry, the simpler illusions dissolve first. As I pointed out yesterday, there are illusions at different levels of our consciousness, starting from superstitions, then deeper than that are the cultural illusions, deeper than that are the psychological illusions, and deepest is this illusion of being a separate self. Now, depending on how far, how deep your inquiry is able to progress, you will clear up those illusions. What Krishnaji is saying is you don't need to go. It is not necessary that you have this sequence. You don't have to get rid of superstitions first, then get rid of cultural illusions and so on. So I'm not saying there is a linear process like that which has to be undergone. If you are very clear, you can see, you can go to the root of the tree and uproot the whole tree. But normally what happens is that one particular branch of the tree manifests in our consciousness, either fear or sorrow or jealousy or conflict. And we are paying attention to that. And therefore, if we go deep enough, we can reach the root. But often one is paying attention only to get rid of the pain. And when the pain is over, that particular branch is over, you don't continue with the inquiry. So this whole approach of trying to solve a problem rather than try to understand the mystery of life, that whole approach of looking upon life as a series of problems to be solved, and this as a method of solving the problem, is itself a false approach. And that blocks in that. So long ago, when Krishnaji separated from the Theosophical Society, and he pointed out that you don't have to do this slow business. You can go directly and free yourself. Leadbeater had said that. Leadbeater said, yes, that direct path exists, but very few can take that path. And therefore, most of the people have to climb gradually and go up the time. The mistake in that is to think that time is required. No, time is not required. Insight is required, and insight is not produced by time. But there is not only one truth to be seen, Salvador. Ultimate truth is this truth of not being a separate self, of being one with everything else. That's the ultimate truth. But there is also the comparison, competition, all the conditioning which society has produced, religious beliefs, all that which is filling up the mind. Once you have freed yourself of all this, yes, perhaps you can get deep insight and uproot the whole tree, which is what happened to him. But, and good luck, I mean, I hope it can happen to us too. But if I may use his own metaphor, he's saying, come upon the learning mind. The learning mind is an open mind. And he made the metaphor of a room. He said, if you close the windows of the room, the breeze can't come in. So if you close the windows of your mind, no change is possible. because no insight can come in. Truth can't come in. Therefore, you must keep the doors and windows of your mind open. But now, because you keep it open, you cannot insist that the wind must blow. You cannot insist that the truth must come to me. So there is an element of grace or whatever you like to call it, by which it comes. Because it's a mystery. How insight occurs is a mystery. It has no path, no leading to it. There's a joke. We should have some humor also. That one student in Brockwood is asking the other, if it's a pathless land, how do you get there? The other one says, get lost.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So the time is a little past 3:15.
Yeah, so we can end for half an hour and then get back again. Eh?
Yes, sir.
It'd be good to relax the mind a little bit. Half an hour. Yeah. It's 6:15. We meet at 6:45.
Yes, sir. 3:45. Yeah.
You can collect
Gather
the
every-
questions if you have. If you don't need the half hour, you can collect more questions from the audience.
Sure. Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
May I stop the video at my end?
Yeah, absolutely, sir. Yes, you can.
Wow,
Yes.
can you hear me? So how do you, if you want to ask a question, what do you do?
Oh, just in the chat, just put your name there. That's all.
No, there is a chat, like this chat I have at the bottom. Should I click?
Yes. Yeah, in the chat, you just put your name, sir. That's all. I'll read out your name. Then you can ask the question.
Okay, then there is a, you put up your name here. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Just,
Okay. Thank you.
sure.
Oh, I'm unmuted. How much time will be taken in between here, and what time will be back?
So we are taking
you're-
in total 30 minutes. So 25 minutes from now, we all should be back.
25 minutes.
Yeah, and you're going to go next on questions, sir.
Good.
Yeah.
Nicole. Yeah.
I will put on some music and turn off 5 minutes to the time.
Ada.
Are there any questions for Rohan and myself? Otherwise, it's okay. No problem.
mango milkshake.
Let's just give a couple more minutes for others to join.
Hey, Roy, I did not understood. Where is that chat box to type the name? Where is located?
Rohan, can you help her?
Yes, I can chat with you, Baldev,
No,
on a
where
private
is
chat.
that chat box to sign the name?
Are you able to see any of our messages?
No,
No.
I have to go on chat. There is one icon
Yeah.
below.
Yeah, I
Correct.
think you have to go there. Yeah.
And there I have to type.
You may type your name to indicate that you would like to ask next question.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Rohan, this is something off the topic. Suppose
Uh-huh.
somebody is on the phone. I think they're not able to get the gallery view, right?
Correct. Yeah, they're not connected. They're only
the
connected with the phone audio,
speaker view.
right?
And
Mhm.
no, they can have a video, but they cannot get the, the gallery view. They can only get the, like, they won't get to see all the 40 people we are on the screen if they're on the phone. Right?
You mean if someone is connected via Zoom app on the phone,
Yeah, yeah.
they can swipe and
Rohan, are you able to hear me?
Yes, sir, we are able to hear you.
Yeah, very good.
To answer Nandini's question, yes, people can see other people on their phone as well by swiping. The
Yeah.
group view is obviously limited because of the screen size.
Right, that's what I was asking. Yeah, I'm not on a phone. I was just inquiring because it happens sometimes
Right.
when you are on the phone. Thank you.
Correct. No problem. Also, there might be a difficulty for someone who is connected just with the phone calling in. For example, the number that ends here with 7213. If they want to ask a question only at that time, they should unmute. Otherwise, please mute yourself.
Mhm.
Yeah, she has done it.
Thank you.
So it's 3:45 and we can go to the next question. And the next question is from Mr. Peter Kesting.
Let me see. I often tell people that we're not persons because as I see it, there's this light in oneself and it is not mine or yours. It's not anybody, doesn't have any, it has no marks in it, has no remembrance, doesn't remember, but it sees. And it seems like there is this way to, Krishnamurti talks about images. We have images of ourselves, we have images of other people. An image is always something in the material world because our bodies are in the material world and our brains are in the material world. Our memories in the material. But this other thing that's in us that sees is something completely free of that. And in order to really put this thing that's this material body, brain, which has all of this history, as Professor Krishna was mentioning, it has its own personal life, and it also has millions of years of evolution. And all those things have produced a structure in there and the structure in the brain so that there are things like hatred, but that's wired into the brain. There's something in the brain that allows us to hate and jealousy and so on and all these things. And it seems like it's necessary to separate oneself completely from all of that in order to look at it. And so I'm asking this kind of a question and talking about this because we're looking at freedom from the known, and I may be stuck in some known of my own. So So isn't it necessary to end completely identification as person? And I don't know if Professor Krishna's here.
Yes.
Yeah, I have a little box up here. And hello, Krishna. This is Peter. I don't think he heard any of that. So that's enough said. We'll see if anybody's interested in.
So would you repeat your question?
My question is, let's make it simple. Isn't it necessary to be completely free of identification in order to watch what this thing is, which is a human being, brain, body, the physical, the material part of it?
Just a minute, sir. Professor Krishna, are you able to hear us? Can you hear us, Professor Krishna? Looks like he's not able to hear. So,
Professor Krishna, are you able to hear us?
no.
No, he's not able to hear.
Okay.
We can ask him to log off and log back in.
So you have a, okay, you're not.
But he can
He can hear us.
in chat, yes.
He can hear us, and we can hear him. So it's his microphone. Can everybody else hear?
Yes.
Yes, we do.
Okay. So it's isolated to Dr. Krishna's.
Isolated.
Can you try speaking, sir?
Myself?
No.
No, Professor Krishna.
Professor Krishna.
Is he on mute, maybe? Rohan, is he on mute?
I don't think
He is not on mute.
No, he's not.
Okay.
I think a problem with his earphone, maybe.
Yeah, we had that problem last week.
Yeah,
You need to.
I'm chatting with him privately.
Why are we not starting?
Oh, wow.
So
we
we
briefly
could not
lost
hear
your
you.
audio, and it seems you were also not able to hear us, but we are back on now. So let's go ahead. Peter was asking a question to you.
Peter, please go ahead and make it a question, sir.
Hello, Krishna. This is Peter. I don't know if you see me.
Yeah, I think he's still not able to hear us.
Oh.
But we are able to hear him.
So I'll keep speaking, and Professor, if you can hear us, please let us know.
Might it have something to do with the music that was being
I
played?
can't hear you.
You cannot hear us. Okay.
My screen says recording is going on.
Did he turn his volume down during the break on his computer, Rohan?
Yeah, that is one possibility.
Hello, Krishna. Hello, hello.
Can you hear us, sir? No. He probably is getting someone's help there.
Probably getting his daughter to come and help. Yeah.
Okay. Hello.
Yeah, now it's coming.
Okay, great.
Wow, great.
Sorry about that. I don't know how, but we lost your audio.
No, it is something at this end because my granddaughter came and clicked on something and it started.
Okay, great.
Let's move forward.
Yeah.
Okay. That's good. Okay, Peter, you're on.
Okay, Professor Krishna, this is Peter Kesting.
Yes, Peter.
And do you remember me? I think you do.
Of course I do. Of course I do.
And what I'm interested in is, let me see if I can get back to where I was. Sometimes I tell people that we're not persons. There's this light in us, which is completely impersonal. It's not yours or mine. And it seems like Krishnamurti says we have images. I have images of you. You have images of me. And all of that stuff that is personhood is connected with the physical body and brain. This material thing has those millions of years of evolution. But in order to watch that, it seems like it's helpful to be able to step out of personhood altogether and be in that thing which is the light. If you think you're part of that thing that's the personhood, that's a conflict in there. You just cannot solve things that way. You've got to step back to where you are not person and you're watching this thing that's person as something completely outside. So I think that's a really important thing, and I don't know whether I'm needing to be freedom from my own knowns.
Yeah, well, it is a bit of a vicious circle because you need to be free in order for the mind not to chatter. And the chattering goes on because of the conditioning. So when he is not free, so how does someone who is not free, is there a transition from some being not free to being free? And he said, no, there is no such transition. You have to start at the other shore.
Right, which is
the other shore.
Intelligence itself, which is non-personal, which is this light in oneself, has to disconnect itself from this history of this body and this body itself as person and stop being a person.
Yeah, so I understand that, Peter, to mean that, I mean, this is not what he said, but what I think, that this this business of starting from the other shore means you don't hold on to your known, and or you keep it very lightly. You don't tightly hold to your conditioning.
Well,
you can't eliminate it because it's there in the brain, but it need not dominate in our consciousness. So that domination comes somehow from some importance we give to it, and an attachment or a habit, and that we need to break. So you start from not knowing. The other shore is a shore of not knowing, which he said in dialogue, that you have to begin with not knowing. But it's not a voluntary process. I cannot start from not knowing by deciding not to know. So it has to also happen as a byproduct of self-knowledge. So I think that self-knowledge is in a way preparatory to that state. Because he says freedom is not at the end of learning. Freedom is at the beginning of learning. Learning does not even begin until you are free from your conditioning. So, in other words, I am myself blocking the perception of truth.
But that's your personhood, right?
That's right. So that's I am blocking. So it's the difficulty, as I see it, is that the truth is there. These are eternal truths. If the Buddha saw it and Christ saw it or Krishnamurti saw it, it's there. Socrates saw it. Truth is a fact. It's around now. And I have the organs of perception. So what's blocking? What's preventing me from seeing it? Nothing other than myself. So I am myself in the way, and I am myself wanting to perceive the truth. So there is a kind of vicious circle there.
Well, isn't that otherness? Can't you say that's one's real self? And all the rest is not real self.
It's a question of language only. But yes, in this, I mean, we said that there is the personality part of, that's the conditioned consciousness, and there is the rest of consciousness, which is just awareness. Awareness is not conditioned. You can watch your thoughts too, and your feelings too. So awareness is not born out of the brain. It is not. It's outside the brain. It functions through the brain. If the brain is dead, you are dead. Then it can't operate. So it requires the brain to work through, but it's not produced by the brain. That's what one is saying, and that's what scientists are also now beginning to realize, that consciousness is not produced by the brain. That is something apart. But Krishna said the mind is outside the brain. So there is a lot of mystery there, something to be learned. But I cannot speculate about it. It has not much value to speculate about it. One has to begin from where one is. And so first step is all this self-knowledge, clearing up the mess, getting free, coming upon a consciousness which is in order, so that it doesn't keep disturbing and distracting all the time and chattering all the time. Before that, learning doesn't even begin, learning in this sense of discerning what is true and what is false, because you're not seeing what is true. You are yourself coloring it. Your conditioning is coloring it. I mean, the difficulty is easy to understand intellectually, but it doesn't end just because you have understood intellectually. It requires some kind of deeper perception or insight, and there is no causation for the insight. There is no path to make that insight happen. So you can only hope to keep the mind, doors and windows of the mind open. And then if it comes, it comes. If it doesn't come, it doesn't come. Somewhere Krishna has written that truth enters the mind like a burglar. which means it has to break down all the defenses which the ego puts up, and still it enters. So that was, if you see chapter 3 of my book, that's where I began the dialogue with this question, that a man who is trapped in the self does not have insight because he is not able to perceive the truth, because the ego colors his perception. And because he can't perceive the truth, the ego continues. So it becomes a vicious circle. And then he went into it very deeply. You can read that chapter. It's a very interesting dialogue. Ultimately, he said, I'm not sure the ego must be completely absent for insight to occur. Or the insight is so powerful that the ego can't interfere, or it wipes out the ego. So that's like uprooting the whole tree. I talked about the tree, metaphor of the tree, where the ego is the root, and the branches are desire and fear and sorrow and all that. They're all branches. So of course, these branches are also connected to the root. But how do you get to the root in order to uproot the whole tree? What manifests in our consciousness is one branch at a time. And you have to be able to see the whole thing as one, connected, not desire separately, pleasure separately, frustration separately, and so on. You have to see the whole thing as one field, one ego field.
Seems you have to be able to be not identified.
Yes.
So that's, well.
But you can't just decide to be non-identified, no? You have to see the falseness of identification. See, perceive. Whether one is intellectually understanding that intellectual understanding is just knowledge. It doesn't lead to perception. That's the pathless bit, going from the knowledge to the perception. There is no path to it. It's an insight.
Can't one see that there's this other, it is something you can discover in yourself, that there's something that is not material. There's something that's not, there's a light. It's not light, but there's something that, I mean, I can look in this room, I can see, right? Things are coming, hitting my eyes, going into the nerves and all that stuff, and things are moving around in there. That's all physical stuff. But there's something here that's not physical, something beyond that. And from that place, one can look then. And there's no identification with that, because that has no structure to it. It has no memory in it. It has, and it's exactly the same one as is in every other one, and also in the squirrel and the bird.
So how do you reach that place?
I think you need to.
Once you are in that place, all this happens, but how do you reach that place?
You need to really say to your own self, interested in it, what is the self? And it's possible then to see that there's something beyond what we think is ourself. I don't know. This is a very difficult thing. Nobody gets any of this.
Whether it is actually happening is the question. All seems right in terms of logic and in terms of words. But words have a way also of making you feel you have understood when you have not understood. So that's the deception in this whole thing. But anyway, if there are other questions, I think we need to give chance to others also.
Well, thanks an awful lot.
Not at all. My pleasure.
Thank you, sir. The next question is from Sam Gezawat.
Krishna,
Yes.
Thank you very much for your time. So, Krishna, I have a question for you. You were saying that if we watch ourselves, observe ourselves in our daily living, our consciousness will reveal to us, and we will see the danger. Sometimes we see the danger, but because of the short-term pleasure, we might pursue that. But why don't we really deeply see the danger that is involved with, our relationships, our society, or drinking, or whatever? So that's one of my questions, Dr. Krishna. Why don't we see the danger? And I was hoping that maybe you can give us some practical, I know we don't like techniques, but a practical advice how we can be in contact with our consciousness the way that you describe being in contact.
I can recall this question was put to Krishnamurti. And I can recall that he was in Ohio with David Bohm and Fritz Wilhelm and other dignitaries. And he said, you are not able to see it because you don't stay with the question long enough. So he said, we will all go to some place where we'll shut ourselves up and we will just continue this dialogue until you all see with me, and we will not come out of that place. So they did that, and David Bohm kept notes of the dialogue each day, and they stayed like that for 10 days, but still the people didn't get it. So I don't know, the answer is not clear. But that was his answer, that you give up on the question. You start saying it's impossible, then that you make it impossible because you say it is impossible. Or you give up, you get frustrated and you give up. So it needs patience, it needs humility, it needs passion to perceive the truth. Because apparently there is deep-seated barrier in the human consciousness. You see, Krishnamurti talked to millions of people throughout the world, and many people just discarded or didn't hear seriously, but quite a few, at least a few hundred, were quite serious about it. As has happened with all other religious teachers as well, there were always very serious disciples who were listening to them and trying their best to understand what the teacher was saying. And yet, the fact remains that nobody really understood him completely. I won't say nobody got anything, because I'm not one who believes that there is only total understanding or zero understanding. Because if that was true, there would be only two kinds of people. There would be wise, liberated people, and there would be fools. But that's not true. That's not an observed fact. There are people who are wiser than other people. You can see in their behavior, I'm not just talking of wisdom as ability to speak about wisdom, but actually in their living, you can see. Mandela was definitely an extraordinarily wise man, and so was Gandhi, but they were not free human beings. Free human beings have been very few and far between. You can count them on your fingers. And we don't also know whether they were really free, or we are imagining that they were free or they were close to it. There's no way to get inside the skin of someone and know. Even Krishnamurti, we might assert that he was free because he came out with such a profound teaching and all that. But Radha Sloss doesn't think so. She thinks that he was pretending. Now, how would you prove to her that you are right and not she? So, at the same time, it has no meaning to try to evaluate him or any other person whether he is free or not. The important thing for our learning is to stay with the question and explore it as best as we can. So example, the question is pleasure the same thing as happiness? Is independent of the source. What difference does it make whether you get that question from Krishnamurti or from Ramana Maharshi, or your son comes from school and asks this question of you? You got a question. And the question is the guru. If you pursue that question, depending on how well you pursue that question, how free you are to pursue that question, whatever understanding you develop about it is your fate. So it's entirely up to us, this learning. Nobody else is preventing us. The prevention is all within ourselves only. And you can discuss that with others as to what are the various blocks that prevent the perception of truth. That means what all blocks insight. And you can enumerate it. But then if you are not free of the blocks, the blocking is still taking place, even though you have explained everything. And that's why professors of philosophy are not Buddhas and Christs and so on. They are still only professors. So this going from the intellectual understanding of the truth, to which there is a path, to the realization of the truth. That means it becomes real as the perception of danger, or the perception of fire, or the danger of a precipice. That's real. You don't need explanation for that. You don't need a logical explanation when you feel hungry. You sense it, that I am hungry. So this direct perception or direct sensing, in which all the senses are also involved, including the mind also being a sense, that is what insight is. And perhaps our mind is too addicted to logic and thinking and so on. So again, as a means of communicating this, I once read a metaphor which is quite summarizes this situation rather aptly, that reason and knowledge and analysis are like the poles of a pole vaulter. You can take their help to raise yourself up to the bar, but if you don't leave the pole, you don't get to the other side. And so it is something like that. It's not that you should not use reason and analysis, but if you remain with reason and analysis, you don't get to the other shore. You remain on this shore. Yeah. So this somewhere renouncing this habit or this training, that training is blocking us. The intellect is blocking us. There's too much dependence on the intellect. And that's just a fragment of one's being. There is also emotions, there is sensitivity, there is beauty, there is so many things. All that needs to be there, the body included. So Krishnaji was keeping all that intact. His contact with nature, you look at his body, the way he sits at the age of 90. So he was quite serious about it. That's what he's saying. We are not serious. We want that our life should continue the way it is. And on top of it, we should have another layer of understanding given by Krishnamurti. That's not what he is talking about. He is talking about complete upheaval. And we are not willing for that complete upheaval. It may mean giving up your job. It may mean giving up property, giving up your family. You're not willing to do that. He was willing to do that. He was willing, Buddha was willing to do that. In fact, he did that. That kind of passion is needed, that you are willing to drop everything when you feel the truth. So actually, among the people in the Theosophical Society, I think the only other person who had that kind of passion for truth was Mrs. Besant. And so Krishnaji said to me, Sir, if Amma had been younger, she would have got it. She would have got it. But you need that kind of passion and commitment to truth, because you can see in her life, every time she perceived something to be true, she just dropped everything else, irrespective of what her friends or family or property, whatever. She just dropped everything. That kind of commitment is needed. We don't have that kind of commitment. We want to carry on the way we are, and we want to only get rid of the negative sides or at least the acute part of the negative side. The mild parts we are willing to retain in order to get the benefits. So that's the nature of the ego. The ego is a very calculating machine. It's calculating profit and loss and saying ultimately this seems more profitable. It's not easy to say you are in, if you honestly say that you are in quest of truth. Will you be in quest of truth even if it costs you, if it pains you, if it disturbs you? So, in other words, we are investing in it a bit non-seriously. And in the very beginning, he said, what you will receive depends on how serious you are with this inquiry. And he says that also in that dialogue in chapter 3, which I have put there with David Bohm, myself, and Asit Chandan. He said, you are unwilling to see. You are unwilling to see because you don't know what it might cost you your professorship, it may cost you your family, it may be, and you're not willing, therefore you're not willing to see. Which is not false, it is true. I'm not willing to just give up my family and so on. And I feel responsible, that would be an irresponsible act. We have often had dialogues that when the Buddha left the palace, his wife and child, and walked away, he didn't know whether he will find liberation or not. Now, supposing he had not found liberation, then we would have just considered him to be a wicked man who ran away from his responsibilities and didn't care about his wife and child and left. But when he went away, he didn't know that he will come upon. So is it that a later event that he became enlightened is justifying the former event? Time reversal. So the only answer is it depends on the state of mind in which the Buddha performed that action. If he performed that action because he wanted to get rid of the nuisance of his wife and family and so on, then it was a selfish action and it would be wrong. If he did it because his concern or his passion was to understand and help humanity free itself of all sorrow, if that was his motive, which included the sorrow of his wife and parents and so on, human sorrow, then it was right action. It was not selfish action. So this in religion, the religious definition of right and wrong is not in terms of what the result is. The result is not known. It is right action if it is done without selfish motive. That means with love and passion. It is wrong action, even if it succeeds. It is wrong action if it is done egoistically. That's the definition. The approach to that action determines whether it is right and wrong, not the result, not the consequence, because the result is not known. That's the businessman's and politicians' approach to right and wrong. That which brings profit, that which enables victory is right, and that which brings defeat or loss is wrong. That's a completely egoistic definition of right and wrong. That's not a religious definition. So right and wrong is not in terms of action. It is in terms of the state of mind in which that action is performed. Whether it's from a state of virtue, or it is or love, or whether it is state of ego. That determines. Yeah.
Can we go to the next question, sir?
Yes, please.
Rohan, go ahead.
Thank you, Professor Krishna.
You're
In the beginning chapters, Krishnamurti talks about, he lays the groundwork for what knowledge and how it serves as authority, and explaining that the authority of the self, that our own conditioning being the hardest one to get beyond, and to reject that authority. In the chapter, he says, first of all, can you reject all authority? And if you can, that means you are no longer afraid. So this, to me, brings a question of fear, and how do we approach the fear? As in, my sense is, seeing the precipice, there is also a fear of some kind, and there is a fear of our own conditioning, due to our own conditioning, and we approach other people truth. As for example, even right now there is a fear in me while asking this question in front of everyone. And so my question is how does one approach the fear, and does it serve a value when one does see a truth of some kind? It may arouse some fear in oneself, and that may propel you to take an action, but oftentimes it's difficult, especially being with other people, to have that state of mind, and it is not clear to me how the fear should be approached. Thank you.
Yeah, it is difficult, Rohan. In fact, Krishnaji himself said, sir, unless you are really serious, don't get into this inquiry. It'll disturb you, it'll burn you. Get into it only if you are really serious to take it up, and you're willing to do anything to pursue the truth. So it's not so easy to be so serious when you have commitments already made and so on, which you are not able to give up. If I go to the example of his own life, his first major sorrow which he experienced was the death of his brother. It had been promised to him by the masters and so on that his brother won't die, and he completely trusted them. And on the basis of that trust, he left Ohio and he decided to go to India, thinking that Nitya has a protection, divine protection, and it all proved false. And then on the boat, he got a telegram saying Nitya has died. For 10 days, it is recorded that he was like mad. And he stayed with that fear and sorrow. And then he wrote a letter from the boat to a friend, which said, it's there in the archives, which said, I have experienced personal sorrow. I am through with it. I have cheated death. So he approached that with a learning mind, not with a mind that was evaluating in terms of those people have deceived me and I have been ill-treated and all that self-pity thing, which is the ego reaction. So I want to illustrate something which is more easy to understand for us. That what is this learning mind? Because you asked me, how should one approach? Whether it is jealousy or anger or fear, whatever it is, order in consciousness, whatever it be, when one is experiencing it, there are two ways to approach it. Either one is reacting to it, trying to escape from it, or find a solution immediately to put an end to the pain, or one is approaching it with an intense desire to understand what is taking place. And his teaching says that the second one brings about change, the intense desire to understand this phenomenon. So you approach life not as a problem to be solved, but as a mystery to be understood, like that. So he understood, and when he landed in India, they said he was completely peaceful. And that was the same year, 1925, in which for the first time he changed to first person and spoke under the banyan tree that I have come and to liberate man, things like that. At the time of the meeting of the Order of the Star of the East in India. And that is regarded as the moment where when that transformation took place. Now, whether that transformation is regarded as Maitreya consciousness coming to him and fusing with his consciousness, or it was just a transformation of his own consciousness. There is a great mystery about all this. We don't know. But that is the first moment at which it happened. Now, he could also have been trapped in self-pity and hatred and getting angry with the people that you promised me and that you have deceived me and so on. None of that happened, right? So I think we should understand this difference between a learning mind and a reactive mind. And I want to give one instance as an example. Sometimes for people like us, it is easier to understand through an example. Now, I have been a physics teacher, and I worked very hard to do my best as a teacher and make the students understand and so on. Now, suppose one of the students goes out and tells a colleague, I think Prof Krishna is a lousy teacher, I don't follow what he's doing in the class, and I'm going to quit or whatever. And this is carried to me. There are two ways I can approach it. I can approach it with a reactive mind, get angry that I take so much pains to teach these people. They don't pay attention in the class, and he's bad-mouthing me to others, spoiling my reputation and so on. And I can get angry and I can call him and threaten him that and fight with him. That's all a reactive mind. But suppose I have a learning mind. I don't have a reactive mind. I take it as an input of information that there is one student in my class who's saying he doesn't understand what I'm teaching. So, but it is my role as a teacher to convey to their minds what the subject matter I have agreed to teach. So I can go back and try to find out whether there are more such students, whether I am talking above their heads, whether I am not understanding their level at which they are, and maybe I need to explain the things which they have not understood yet in order for them to understand what I am now talking about. So I take that information as an opportunity to learn about myself, and there is no feeling of insult or anger or reaction. You know, so that is the learning mind. The learning mind which takes it as an input of information and not as a criticism or an opposition. I gave yesterday the example of how Krishnaji was criticized by a man in Rockwood, and he said, I watched myself for a whole week before saying to myself, it's not true. Now that's the way one has to look at criticism. And that's also the way at which you should look at your own criticism of yourself too. So if there is fear, I have to then pay attention and try to find out how does that fear arise in me? Because everything germinates within the consciousness, then grows, then stays, attains a peak, and then dies. We don't stay with that whole process. We do in science. We observe the phenomenon from one end to the other because our personal self is not involved in that understanding. It's objective observation. You are only trying to understand that phenomenon. Here, you are experiencing a pain and you want to quickly get rid of that pain. So you begin to approach it as a problem to be solved and not as a mystery to be learned about. Understand? So that means and the entity that is saying it's a problem to be solved is the ego. And that's the human problem. So the ego itself blocks learning because it is not willing to die. That's one way of looking at it.
Thank you, sir.
There is a vicious circle there.
Can we go to the next question, sir?
Please.
Cecilia Martinez, please.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Cecilia.
Thank you, Professor. It is really a very arduous job to be able to distinguish when it is the thought that observes and when there is only observation without there being an observer. If all we can do is put order in the room, thought, attentive living, could you explore a little that subtle difference between being attentive and being observant?
Sure. First of all, one should not create a new morality out of Krishnamurti's teaching, saying one has to be all the time aware, one should not have thoughts and so on. That is like conventional religion, saying you should love your neighbor and things like that, and then use your will to do that. Because Krishna said virtue cannot be practiced. And there is deep truth in that you cannot decide about these things. So the best thing to do is to approach it with passive awareness, not complaining, not judging, not saying thought should not have been there because Krishnamurti said this or that about thought, but just observing what is actually taking place. If thought is coming in, it's coming in. If comparison is happening and jealousy is developing, it is developing. Become aware of that, mindful of that, and learn about that. Learn about everything that is taking place by learning. Don't make ideals that this should be there, that should not be there. That is what brings in the observer. The interference of the observer comes through judgment. So don't judge, just observe. Of course, you're not observing blankly. You have a question in your mind. So learning takes place when there is observation with a question. You have to be with a question, but stay with that question. Don't be in a hurry to find an answer or the ending of that question. But if you don't have a question, what happens is you can observe something and it will create pain or pleasure or joy. And it will pass by and you have not learned anything. You have experienced, but you have not learned anything. But when you ask a question, why does this happen? And then you pay attention to how it started and so on. You are now beginning to learn because you are beginning to observe things which you have not observed before and so on. So it's a rather subtle process in which there is no aim, there is nothing to be achieved, not even a desire to change what is taking place, but simply to understand. The desire to understand something is not egoistic. The desire to become something, to get something out of it, the aim, that brings in the motive, which is the ego. And the ego blocks learning. So the learning mind is not an egoistic mind. Krishna said the learning mind is the religious mind because it's not an egoistic mind. It's not that you are religious if there is no jealousy. It is how do you approach the jealousy? Are you approaching jealousy in yourself with a learning mind or with a reactive mind? What I just said to Rohan applies here too. So the reactive mind is the egoistic mind, the judging mind, the condemning mind, the reacting mind, the escaping mind. It's all wanting some kind of profit for itself. And that's the biggest block. But the learning mind doesn't block. But you cannot insist that because now I'm approaching with a learning mind, why is learning not happening? You have to just watch what takes place. Once somebody complained to Krishnamurti that I have been doing what you have been saying and the truth has not come to me. So Krishnaji turned back and said to him, sir, why should the truth come to you? You have to ask the question in reverse also. That means I have to deserve for the truth to come to me. I can't insist that it must come because I have now done X, Y, and Z to get it. Otherwise, there is a path to truth. So there is no path to truth.
Does anybody else have a question for Professor?
Thank you.
Question.
Increases.
Looks like Nandini would like to ask the next one.
Yes. Nandini, you're muted.
Yeah. Actually, it's not as much a question as I'm just thinking aloud. A learning mind to me is a mind that has absolutely no direction. So when I'm trying to learn something, that means it's no more a learning mind because it is very much tunneled and I'm trying to reach the goal of my learning. So when I have a desire to learn something, definitely I have made myself imprisoned in the idea of my learning objective. So I think when there is a desire to learn about something and just the open mind, they're completely of two different structures.
Yes, it's true. What you're saying is true for the conventional meaning of learning, because when you want to learn language or you want to learn the subject, academics and so on, what you're saying applies. But here, when you are trying to learn what is true and what is false, you really don't know what is true and what is false. You don't have an idea. It's not that you know what is true and then you are going towards that truth. The truth is posited as the unknown. What you know is what is actually taking place and what you are observing. And Krishnaji is saying, don't make conclusions about it and then act on that conclusion, because the conclusion blocks inquiry, ends inquiry. So this learning is merely an approach which is free from seeking a result. It has no importance to seek a particular result. It has no idea what it will be. It's like an exploration. I don't know the answer, but I'm exploring because I'm interested. Now, if you're interested, it's your passion, it's your love, that is not an ego. But if you are trying to get something for yourself as an answer, so that you will profit from it, or whether in religion or in science or whatever field, then it becomes an egoistic activity. Then that kind of desire is egoistic. So when you don't have an end result in mind, and you're just trying to understand the mystery of life, that there is no end to this exploration. You just live with such a mind, learning mind. You're not seeking a result out of it. But the false will drop away. The moment you see the false as the false, it drops away. And that's the beauty of this inquiry. If you treat that as a result, well, it is a consequence of learning. But you are not seeking that. It happens on the side. So that's why wisdom or understanding is a byproduct of learning. And the change is a byproduct of learning. The change is not a product of will, of your decision.
So the learning mind has no questions. It just looks. And whatever it sees, it takes in. It understands.
Well, it has a broad question. Why is this happening? That kind of question is there. Or how is this happening? That means I'm feeling jealous. Then I do have a question. Why am I feeling jealous? Not that I should not be jealous, but why? That's a mystery. How does jealousy arise in me? But we judge and we feel ashamed because we have an idea that I should not be jealous. And Krishna is saying, don't approach it like that. Then you will be into the traditional religious hypocrisy of saying, I should love my neighbor, but I don't love my neighbor. So it creates that duplicity. You are this and you want to be that. So there is a conflict between what you are and what you should be. He's saying just study, understand what is, not what should be. Forget about what should be. That's an imaginary thing. But our mind is very strongly conditioned in terms of these shoulds. It is not so easy to drop them. Because right from childhood, we have grown up with shoulds. So it becomes a habit of the mind to approach in that way. And he's saying, see the truth of that also, that that's a false approach. It is very subtle, Nandini, not easy. He's not giving us an easy path. There is no easy path. If there was an easy path, there are millions of intelligent people who would have become free by now.
Yeah,
There
that's
is no
true.
easy path. It's a very deep-rooted barrier within the human consciousness. It's there in each one of us. It's not as if I don't have it and you have it, or nothing like that. No comparison. It's a human condition. How many people have become free? I mean, why did Krishnamurti not get conditioned into theosophy? How did he break away? And he had nothing. He had no education. He had no support without the Theosophical Society. And yet he just walked out, seeing the falseness of it. Now that kind of commitment, do we have that? No. That's the problem. Mrs. Besant walked out.
Just a small thing. Do you think he walked away from theosophy or he walked away from the society, the organization?
That depends on what meaning you give to the word theosophy. I myself regard theosophy as a quest for truth. Their motto says that truth is the highest religion. And you cannot object to any of their objectives. The universal brotherhood of man. Any rational person would agree that whole of humanity. So that's an objective. And then to integrate science, religion, and philosophy into a single quest for truth. You can't object to that. So there is nothing that is objectionable per se in being a member of the Theosophical Society, because they don't ask you to believe in anything. But he differed from Leadbeater's theosophy. Leadbeater's theosophy is a particular brand of theosophy, where he was mentioning people and giving initiations and believed in gradual evolution of spirituality in a human being. And he denied that. He said, no, all this is false. And he also denied the dependence on occult masters and so on. He did not deny the occult masters, but he denied that dependence for the sake of discovering the truth. Right? He denied even the dependence on a living master, so not to talk of dead masters. So that's how I understand him. And he really tried, he hasn't said that in so many words, but it's my opinion that he tried to change the Theosophical Society from within. Because at that point of time, the Theosophical Society had started becoming like a religion with authorities, with its own rituals, its own form of prayer, and its own sacred texts, and so on, exactly like a religion. Maybe a broad-minded religion, but still a religion. Yeah? And he felt that that was not the way to come upon wisdom or understanding, that it blocks. All those things block. Belief blocks. The speculation blocks. The dependence on the teacher blocks. So he wanted to change that. So he wanted to close down the esoteric section, and Mrs. Besant did that. But that angered some of the other leaders in the Theosophical Society. People like Arundel and even Jinraj Dasa and Leadbeater and so on. And so they threw him out. It's not that he left. They threw him out. Literally, his things were thrown out of his apartment, put on the road. That's what it was. So he said they didn't want me there. And therefore, he just walked out of that place.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Can we take the next question, sir? From Baldev.
If there is time, yes, there is 7 minutes more.
We'll do the last question. Yes, go ahead.
Can the love and compassion can be cultivated? Because what I have seen, in my own family, 2 children born, one is fully with love and compassion, while the other one is not with all that. And they grew up in a similar fashion. And in spite of best trying, nothing changed with the other. So is it a born quality of virtue that love and compassion is difficult to cultivate? So what's your take on that?
Yeah. Everything has a genetic aspect and also there is nature and nurture. The two things together form a human being. Now, nature is genetics. The genetics itself may have made it easier for Krishnamurti to come upon this understanding or to break through this ego thing and so on. We don't know. It may be that for another person, it may not be so easy. So there is genetics, but there is also a lot of contribution of the nurture, the way that human being is being treated, brought up, because all the psychological problems, the cultural prejudices and so on, they all come from the environment, from the nurture. So we just make it more difficult for the child, whichever child. He may be a child who is fortunate to have good genetic disposition. Another child may be a bit retarded or may have bad genes or may even have certain syndromes and so on biologically. But even the retarded child, Madame Montessori showed that she took a whole class of retarded children and approached them with love and compassion and as a friend and treated them with respect and helped them to grow in their learning. And it made a world of difference to them. And when the authorities saw what she had achieved, then they agreed to give her a normal class of normal children to handle. And so she was a pioneer in this field of education. And that was that you have no right to judge a child. You are there as a friend to the child to help the child. Whatever that child may be, your role is to help the child, not judge the child and condemn the child and things like that, or compare that child with another child. That's a completely different approach. And Krishnamurti schools have adopted that approach. Krishnamurti chose Montessorians as the head of both his schools, Rishi Valley as well as Rajghat. They were Montessorians because that vision. What is additional in Krishnamurti's vision is this emphasis on self-knowledge. That was not there in that inquiry for self-knowledge was not part of Madame Montessori's vision, because she was probably dealing with smaller children, and that this applies only to grown-up children. But otherwise, no comparison, no punishment, no competition, no pressure, all this, no fear, all this was there in Montessori also.
Thank you.
We close the session, sir?
I would say so. Yes, it's 8 o'clock. We meet next Friday.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Thank
I
you
have
very
a
much.
question.
Yes, sir.
A minor question.
Yes.
Instead of Friday, because it becomes late in the evening, and I feel a bit tired in the evening by that time. So is it possible for us to do it a little earlier? Not Friday won't be possible because it's a working day, but on Sunday instead, you had said to me that it's difficult for people to do it on Sunday.
Sunday is a difficult thing for most people, sir, because that is something that I have already surveyed within our group. And
I thought Morning may be difficult because people go to church or temple and so on. But the afternoon time, the same as 2 to 5, like today, same kind of time on Sunday is also difficult, you think? Because this time is all right, 5 to 8 is all right. But 8 to 10 it becomes a bit late. It's not a big problem. I can do it. I did it yesterday and I didn't find any serious problem. So just think about it.
Why don't we, suggestion to come in 1 hour early on Fridays for us in California, instead of 5, come in at 4. So Dr. Krishna's time would be 7 o'clock.
So Saeed,
It's a suggestion.
That was something that we had already talked about within the group among people who are working.
So am I. But we
I
have
know.
to provide convenience for Dr. Krishna.
No.
Yes.
No,
So the other option for us is that we start at same time at 5 o'clock, but keep it an hour and a half instead of 2 hours. If that works out for Professor Krishna and for everybody else. But I do know for a fact, starting before 5 o'clock in California on Friday does not work for
So don't change anything. We can always close at 1.5 hours if we finish. And if it doesn't finish, we'll go on till 2 o'clock. Not a problem. Yesterday, I didn't have any problem. So it's all right. I thought I might have, but I didn't have.
So I will also go back and see if it is possible for us to move it. But I have gone through that, sir. I took that range of 4 to 7 California time, and we played back and forth, and finally we said we cannot start anything earlier than 5 o'clock. But then definitely we can just do an hour and a half on Fridays if that'll work for you.
I don't want to pry. It's a question of privacy. So I don't want to pry more, but I don't really understand what is it on Sunday that people do between 2 and 5 in California, which blocks them. Normally people go to church in the morning, I understand. If you say yes, that's family time because children are also, but nowadays children are at home because of the lockdown. The schools are also.
We'll go back and look at Sunday afternoon as an option. And
don't try too hard, but if it is easily possible, then do it. Because from my side, it's not a big problem, but it is some problem.
But there is one other thing that we have to take in mind, sir.
Yeah.
There are some people who are joining from India, and they're able to join that Friday session.
That's true.
Without any problem. And
okay.
There is a gentleman who is joining from East Africa.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, and for him also, Friday is convenient and Saturday is not. I mean, they're not even joining on Saturday.
Yeah.
So if we go ahead and put Sunday afternoon, then that segment of the people will have to completely drop out.
No.
These are the problems of democracy.
We won't drop anybody. No. Okay.
So I sincerely suggest that we stick with current schedule because I really, trust me, I've gone back and forth on this timings quite a bit. And then eventually I had to come to that and say that, sir, this is what we have.
Okay, no, that's fine. I'll try my best to make myself 10 years younger.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
Shall I end it?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Rohan, can you stay for some time?
Yes.
I just want to talk to you.
Okay.
Can you stay? Yeah, thank you. Okay, when I press this chat and then it comes up like that. So when I type to, it only shows up to everyone. You understand? I don't know where you get this from thing. Can you explain?
Yes, either you can send a message to everyone, or you can select a specific person from there and send a message to them. For asking questions,
I want to ask a question.
yes,
So how
for
do I
asking
do?
questions, it's okay to send a message to everyone so that.
No, you're not listening to me. I'm saying when other people ask question, it comes up like from. So how do I do that?
You don't have to do anything for that, sir. You just, when you type it, Zoom will show us that it is from you.
You type it and enter it, then that it will automatically come that it's from you.
We'll see your name.
Send it, Baldev. Do it. Do a test right now.
So I go and chat.
Yeah, do a test on there. Put in test.
If I know it's yeah, it's not letting me do it.
Do you see a chat window, a text box to type in?
No, first I have a chat window at the below of this video where this mute, shop video, participant chat.
Okay.
So if I click on it,
Yes.
so it shows up this window bit and it says everyone send chat to.
Yes. Yes. Send a chat to us there. To everyone, that's fine. You can try sending a chat.
So just type in.
Yeah, just type in there.
Well, what is the difference between others when they say from?
Just type it in, Baldev, and then you'll see after you hit send. There you go. Yay!
So I was not pressing the button, right? I was not entering it.
Yeah.
Okay.
These old folks are really.
That is a learning mind.
That is a learning mind, yes.
Thank you guys. I have learned.
Thank you guys. Thank you so much.
Yeah, for next week, we're going to stay with the same schedule, Friday and Saturday, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. California time, and 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. on Saturdays. Believe me, I have done a tremendous amount of research on this by working not just with the group within California, but people who have emailed me back and forth between India and here, East Africa and here, New Zealand and Australia and so on. Some of them are not joined, they have not joined yet, but that is something that we have made a commitment to them in terms of what kind of availability is there so that they made arrangements to be part of it. Now, I realize that it might be of some inconvenience to Professor Krishna, so that's why I'm offering to him that we would do for an hour and a half on Friday nights instead of 2 hours, and then we'll stay with 3 hours on Saturday. So the contact time is going to be 4.5 hours a week instead of 5 hours a week. And then we can perhaps take a shorter break time on Friday or even on Saturday as well. So trust me, I did the research. I surveyed a lot of people. And some of the people who are right now here in this group, they would not have been here but for this schedule. I know, I don't want to name the names, but I know them.
Like yesterday, we finished at 6:30 or 6:45.
Yeah, which is fine.
So we can finish that, early a little bit on Fridays.
Yeah, which is fine, so that's what we're suggesting. Yeah.
Okay, great. This is wonderful teaching from Professor.
It's awesome. Thank you, everybody.
Right, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Namaste.
From Hawaii.
Don't serve too much, Baldev.
Try not to. Thank you, Rohan.
Thank you, Baldev. Bye.
Bye.
Bye for now.